All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Society of Thoracic Surgeons Congenital Heart Surgery Database user group call. Today is Tuesday, February the 7th of 2023. Sorry, I cut your music short, Chastity, I know. So today, again, is Tuesday, February 7th. Thanks everybody for joining. On the call with me today from the STS side, we have myself and from STS, I'm going solo today. And then we have from our consultant team, we have Chastity, Leslie, and Melinda, and we have Dr. Subramanian as our surgeon leader on the call today. Thank you everyone for joining me. Quick agenda. Going to cover some brief STS updates, and then we're going to turn things over to Chastity and Leslie for our education portion for today. And then, as usual, we'll end things with Q&A. Friendly reminder to please submit your questions via the Q&A. And, well, it doesn't look like chat's an option. It's not open. So, again, just please submit your questions via the Q&A. If you'd like to speak, please just raise your hand and I will unmute you. Just make sure your microphone is enabled on your end. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, for STS updates, just want to kick things off. I know everyone was sent an email at the beginning of the year, last month. We do have a new support plan. So IQVIA is no longer handling Tier 1 support for us. So Tier 1 support is now being handled by the STS directly. And again, this is for all databases. So if you have questions regarding the participant, regarding your analysis report, you have questions regarding the IQVIA dashboard, you have questions about login or access, please reach out to us at stsdb_helpdesk@sts.org. So again, if you have any questions, we're no longer utilizing the CHSD tech support at IQVIA.com. Again, all questions should be directed to STSDB at helpdesk_helpdesk@sts.org for participant report related questions, IQVIA dashboard questions, login access. Please reach out to us here. If you have general operational questions regarding contact updates, you have questions regarding contracts or other general database questions, continue to utilize STSDB@sts.org. And then also for clinical question support, coding questions, please reach out to the clinical question request form. And wanted to point out, when you are submitting those clinical questions, please ensure that the correct version and database are selected, as each of these, based on which database version you select, these questions are routed to specific mailboxes that Chastity and Leslie access. So when you are submitting your question, please scroll down and under database version, again, just please ensure that you're selecting the correct database version, congenital 341. If your question obviously relates to version 341. When the new version comes out, there'll be an option here for congenital version 6.2, 3.2. So be sure when you're submitting questions for the new version, you select the appropriate data version here on the dropdown. If you have anesthesia related questions, please ensure that you select congenital anesthesia version 341. So again, just ensure that you are selecting the correct data version. Leslie, did you have anything to add there? Anything that I'm missing?
Nope, that's great. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. If you have any questions about, if you're not sure who to contact with your questions, of course, you can always reach out to me directly and I will get you to the appropriate resource. All right. Additional STS updates, the spring 23 harvest, which will include surgery dates of January 1, 2019 up through December 31st of 2022. The harvest is ongoing and will close on March the 10th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So please be sure to get that data file in prior to that harvest close date, March the 10th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. Opt-out date is no later than March 14th. So please ensure that your data is in the warehouse, clean, and ready to go prior to that harvest close deadline. The 6.23.2 data collection resources are now available. I just got word, if you weren't aware, the STS data collection resources website was down this morning, and I just got word that it is back up. So let me bring this over, see if I can access. So I just wanted to point out everything that is posted on our data collection resources page. So looks like Gabby has gotten everything posted for us. So version 6.23.2, if you go out, click on the drop down here, you will see that this version, please note, it is effective July 1, 2023. You should not be entering any cases with this form until July 1, 2023. The training manual is a work in progress. It is Chastity, Leslie team are working very hard about this, and the training manual will be available coming soon, more details to follow. The data collection form is posted. We have the PDF version as well as the Word version of the form. Additional resources that are available to you. We have the full data specifications. We have the itemized changes from version 3.4.1 to 6.23.2. We have a summary checklist of the changes between the versions, and as well as the software specifications. The software specifications are what's sent to the vendors and outlines all the technical details for the software, for the collecting the data. There's some additional useful information in there. If you want to take a look, there's a nice little table in there that outlines all of the data versions versus with the surgery dates that are collected for each version. So that is a little bit helpful information. I print that out and keep that handy at my desk. So again, all of these resources are out here. I do not recommend printing them out. As you can see, the data specs for the new versions, just over 1,000 pages. And the the data collection form is here as well. So please take a look. And if you have any questions, please let us know. And as we had mentioned earlier, we will be providing additional education for the adults with congenital heart disease component, in the new version as we get closer to July. So more education is coming regarding the new version. So that information is out there and available to you. All right, additional STS updates. I just wanted to make you aware that the January training manual is going to be posted by the end of this week. I know Gabby has that in her possession, so she is working to get that posted for us. So that will be coming and available, actually probably should be available by tomorrow at the latest. I also wanted to point out a couple of new documents that are posted in the IQVIA library. So there is a Fall 22 Harvest Composite Quality Rating Summary. This information used to be provided in the old analysis overview, and to be honest, I don't know why it had not been available in the new platform since we moved over to IQVIA. So I just wanted to bring this up. Let's see here. So where's it at? I just had it highlighted. Okay, it's up at the top. Up at the top. I need more coffee. Okay. So my computer is very slow, so sorry guys. So this is the Harvard Composite Quality Rating Summary, and this gives you a breakdown of how many sites, how many participants received 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, a total of 117 participants, and 113 participants uploaded the analyzable files in the data for the data warehouse for the Fall 22 harvest. So this report will be refreshed with each harvest. So at the end of once the Spring 23 analysis reports come out, I'll have another one of these documents for each harvest moving forward. So this is available to you out on the STS, within the IQVIA platform, if you would like to get that information.
Leanne, just may I quickly weigh in?
Yes.
So again, we will work with IQVIA and the STS to alter the verbiage here. I want to make it clear to all our data managers, we are not following a star rating for the congenital heart surgery database. So this verbiage really means as expected, better than expected, or worse than expected. That's the verbiage that's going to show up on your reporting as well. That's the verbiage we're going to start using here moving forward. I really want to make sure that that communication is clear to you and to your surgeon leaders. The congenital heart surgery database does not use star ratings for a variety of reasons. So what you're seeing in that table that Leanne is so kindly displaying is that the 1 star is that their mortality is more than expected for their given case mix. 2 star is mortality is as expected for the participants' case mix. 3 star is mortality is better than expected than for the participants' case mix. And we will work with IQVIA on fixing this language.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Subramanian, and my apologies, that is 100% correct. So I'm going to have Melanie actually, until we get that verbiage correct, I'm going to have Melanie take this, make this inactive, so that way things aren't getting passed around. So things doesn't cause confusion, you know, if we share this with our surgeons and leadership. So I'm going to have Melanie remove this, make that link inactive, and then I'll get that corrected, and then we'll get it posted. I'll have it posted later today. So I apologize, and thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate that.
And with respect to a question that was asked, no star rating assigned means that, you know, they did not meet the criteria to receive a comparative score of O to E ratio. That's what no star rating assigned means. And that explanation is there on the website as well, but happy to direct you there if needed.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Subramanian. Also out on the STS, out in the IQVIA platform is the Norwood source of pulmonary blood flow. This information also used to be kept in the analyses overview. Within the IQVIA platform, you'll get a warning message indicating for some of your Norwoods that source of pulmonary blood flow was not identified. So this document here gives you instructions on coding source of pulmonary blood flow. So again, this used to be in our previous analyses report overviews from our previous DCRI reports. I just pulled that out and put that into one singular document and put it out here on the IQVIA platform. That's all I have in regards to STS updates. Next, I'm going to turn things over to Chastity and Leslie.
Great, thank you. So today Leslie and I are going to talk a little bit about the new reports, since I think that's probably the most timely topic to cover in this webinar. So I do want to put a plug in about the survey we're all working on first, and then we will break down some information for the analysis reports. Next slide. So let's talk about external surveys. Next, the one on all of our minds currently is the US News survey. I know many of you know this, but I do think it's good to reinforce, as well as just to understand, that there is no relationship between STS and the US News survey. So while I know they get a hold of our definitions and information that's out there, and when reports get released and things, this is not coming from STS directly. They have no relationship with US News, nor do they provide any input into the questions or how things are scored, or what kind of information is being asked. So I know Leslie and I have received, as has Leanne, many questions about the survey. And we can't provide any clarification on the survey because, especially Leslie and I, like you, we don't have any more information than you have currently. And so our advice is to direct all of your questions to US News directly. They know what they're asking. They know what they're looking for. They know how they want programs to answer the questions. And so, I'm sorry that we can't provide any more information. I've already submitted a handful of questions, as has Leslie, to the survey directly. So again, this is not done by STS, and there's no input from STS to US News for the survey. And I know, because it looks like it's in our verbiage and what we talk about every day, that it feels like to many of us that how is STS not providing this? But they are not. So if you can go back to your institutions or your US News survey administrators within your hospital and make sure that they know that this is not being directed by STS, everything needs to go to US News. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about how we access the new reports in the IQVIA platform. And so if we go to the next slide, I did a couple brief screenshots. I know some of us are new and we've not accessed reports before, so I just wanted to make sure people understood. So you log in to IQVIA, and on the left-hand side in the black box, you have all of your, you have your menu. And so you want to go under analytics to operational reports. And when you select that, then the operational reports field will open up, and you're going to go all the way to the bottom and select the CHSD risk adjusted dashboard report. Next slide. And then what pops up are the dates. And so you want to select the analysis period for the report you're looking for. So if you notice, we've now had 3 analysis periods. So 3 reports have now populated into this platform. And so you select whichever one you're looking for. Obviously, usually the most recent one is probably what you're looking for. So if you select whichever dates, then your tables will pop up. Generically, this is just a screenshot of what it would look like if you participate in anesthesia. If you do not participate in the anesthesia modules, then you will only see the risk adjusted and analytical reports, as well as the column of lesion specific reports. Each one of these then has its own, each one of these is its own table. And so you'll see they have the table name, as well as then in parentheses, table 1, table 16, table 7. And so then that's how you access each individual table. Next slide. So let's go into what was updated in this analysis and what implications does this have for your program. Next. So as you know, going into this, we talked a lot about what was going to happen with these reports, and we continue to receive questions about them. So I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page and that you have this clarification, or that you're sharing it with your teams. So remember, in this analysis report, the new stat mortality scores were utilized. So these are all in Appendix C listed on the STS website, but the new stat mortality scores were used. Secondly, STS employed the new combination procedures. And so we're going to go over a few examples and look at what this means. But in the blue box, if you could just focus on this, you cannot compare to prior analysis reports, because if you're looking at the stat mortality scores from the last report to this report, and many of the stat mortality scores have changed, you can't do a comparison of, gosh, my length of stay is longer for stat mortality category 4 than it was previously, and vice versa. This will also cause a mismatch to your local data, because remember, we cannot code the new combination procedures. We can never code the new combination procedures in the older data version. You cannot code those until 6.23.2 goes live. Next slide. So just an example here and a reminder, when we look at the new stat scores, that multiple procedures had their stat scores changed. Some were given a higher stat score, some were given a lower stat score. There are some procedures that were, for the first time ever, assigned a stat score. So this is a difference in your data than if you look at your previous analysis reports. So I just pulled in, for an example, coarctation repairs, and you can see in the top line, coarctation repair end-to-end extended. The old scores are in white. So the stat mortality score previously, it was 0.5, and the stat mortality category was 2. Now this procedure is a new stat mortality score of 0.2 and mortality category of 1. So if you were to compare your coarc repairs, you have a difference in stat scores. And so you may see in this report, I had a very significant increase in volume to my stat category 1 procedures. And this is because many procedures dropped into stat category 1 from their previous designation of 2 or whatever. So cannot compare tables that are stratified by stat scores to previous reports. This includes things like length of stay, mortality, anywhere where the stat scores are used on the table. Remember that your software is vendor specific, right? You've picked out your vendor. Some vendors include stat scores as a part of their product. Others do not. This was not a requirement in previous versions to have the stat scores embedded into your vendor software. And even if your vendor does include stat scores as a part of their product, they're not obligated to update the stat scores between version changes. So they're allowed to do it, but they're not obligated to do it. STS can't designate or force them to update these scores. So I know some of you, this will cause a mismatch in your data, that you look like you have X number of stat category 2 procedures when your report is saying you have Y number of category 2 procedures. And so that can be, you know, just, I know, cause for a headache right now until your stat scores get updated so you can view these easily. So remember, stat scores are listed in Appendix C on the STS website. It looks just like this table here, where you have the old stat scores in white and the new ones are in the yellowish colored columns. Next slide. So if we look at an example of the new combination procedures and how that analysis was employed. So over on the left, coded in your local software could be procedures 110, VSD repair patch, along with a secondary procedure of procedure 20, ASD repair primary closure. So you know, based on the rules of which procedure has the highest stat score, that our primary procedure in this example would be your VSD repair patch, which has a stat score of 0.1. However, and this is what you have submitted, you uploaded into the IQVIA platform, what went to DCRI for analysis and is now, and what is in your local software. But what came back analyzed in the report is procedure 5001, 110 plus 20, which is VSD repair patch plus ASD repair primary closure. This has a stat score of 0.2. So you can't code this, you can't go back and code this, but just know in the analysis, you now have a procedure that a different primary procedure than what you have coded locally. And, you know, it's going to be analyzed differently and you have a stat score of 0.2. I know this will cause grief as you're trying to create reports locally. I don't know if vendors are willing to do anything to help this along or give you special reports, or if this would have to be something that's manually done when you're reporting out your local data. But you cannot code the new combination procedures until the new version goes live. And yes, this will cause a headache of a mismatch in your local data. Understood. Next slide. So the one before. Sorry, one question that we have received over and over and over pertains to, table one, next slide, sorry. Why is the number of operations submitted different from the operations in our analysis? So this is the question that we've received over and over. So I included just the STS, a snapshot of the STS data, so you could see the difference in volume. So if you see in the picture, operations submitted in that first year of July 18 to June of 19, there's just over 40,000 operations that are submitted. However, if you look in the next line, operations and analysis, it's almost 31,000 cases. So what is the discrepancy between all of your cases that you're submitting versus what is in what's considered operations in analysis? So just looking at the definitions, which are in the documents that Leanne has shown, and Leslie will cover a little bit more on resources in her presentation, but operations submitted is going to be the total number of operations submitted, and this includes all op types. Whereas analysis operations are really defined as cardiac operations, or the number of cardiac operations, CPV cardiovascular, and no CPV cardiovascular op type. So it's going to get rid of your thoracic, ECMO, VAD, any other op type of surgeries that have been completed and are in your software. So that is the cause for the discrepancy. A couple other things to point out here. If you look at the bottom, differences in the calculation, we've gone over the op types that are included, but to be included in the analysis, we're starting to employ some logic now in table one. So operations and analysis does require you to have gender, male or female. So anyone that is marked with ambiguous will not be included in the operations in analysis, which will also mean you're not included in any of the mortality analysis moving down throughout the rest of the tables. So this is all spelled out in your report overview and also in that spreadsheet that's included as well in the IQVIA platform. And that should help you determine who's in each table and why you might see some of these discrepancies. Next slide. I will turn it over to Leslie.
Thank you. So this is once you pull up your report, Leanne, you can go to the next slide. Yours, if you participate in anesthesia, will look something like this. Like Chastity mentioned, if you don't participate in anesthesia, you'll see just the left two columns. And we'll focus on the left two columns for today. So we have heard over and over for over a year, and Chastity just said it a couple times, that we cannot compare our data to our old reports, and we cannot compare our data to our local reports, or our local data. But what we can do is make some comparisons within these reports to see if everything makes sense and make sure that the patients you expect to be there are there. Next slide. So one of the first things I do as soon as these reports are released, the first things I look at are tables 1, 16, and 19. And I'm looking at these particularly because they share a lot of common fields. So they are delineated by stat category. And unfortunately, I didn't have a dummy report to pull up and show you all of the differences. But when you look at your reports, you can look at table 1 and all of your different stat categories for the number of patients who are in there, the eligible number of patients versus your mortalities, and you can compare that to table 16 and table 19. Now, it's not a one-to-one comparison. There's a few differences that go into the analytics for each table, and we'll get into where that's described later. But those are the first 3 things I look at. You can also, as you all know, drill into those patient lists with the fields that have an asterisk. So you'll do that. You can do that. That's what I do. Look and see if there's a difference in those numbers. Look at the patient list and figure out why it's not matching, which patient is off. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, another one. I have too many report slides in there. Okay, after I looked at table 1, 16, and 19 and compared my stat categories, I look at table 7 and table 16. And the reason I do this is because you can look at neonate volume, and that's one of our largest for our program and one of our highest mortalities. So I do the same thing. I look at the volume and I look at the mortalities and I compare the list of patients in each one to make sure that they're all reported accordingly. Next slide. And again, sorry about that. One more. There we go. And then finally, I look at our benchmark operations and I compare these columns to the similar lesion specific reports. So you can again look at your VSD volume in your benchmark table versus your lesion specific report. I look at the TET repairs. I look at the AVSD repairs. That will be your complete and benchmark. And I look at the complete line and AV canal table. And then you can look at arterial switches and your Norwood numbers. Now, again, it's not exact because there's different criteria that goes into these, but it gives you an idea. If you have 0 patients reported in your Norwood benchmark report, but they're all showing up in table 28, then somewhere along the line, the data has gotten messed up. So before, I kind of sound any alarms, I look at these things and make sure that relatively my patients are reported as I expect in each of those tables. Next slide. Okay, and then these are the important resources when you get your report and you're starting to look through it. These are the things that I look at each time I view the report. So one in the IQVIA library is the analysis report overview, and that tells you sort of what goes into each table, what makes a procedure eligible for analysis, things like that. The next one would be the analysis report calculation spreadsheet, and that's the giant Excel that we've shown multiple times, but across the bottom of that Excel, it's divided by table. You can go into each table number and see exactly what the population is for the table, what the inclusion and exclusion criteria are, and then the logic for each line. And then finally, the Appendix C, which is all of our updated stat scores. So I think a lot of the questions we got were about, not remembering that we're using those updated stat scores. Sorry, Leanne, you can go back to that. We can show that if you want. Yep. So this is the calculation spreadsheet. And you can see on the bottom there, Leanne's flipping through. This gives you exactly what goes into the table. And inclusion and exclusion is at the top, what makes it into the table. And then for each line item reported, the logic is there. So if you're curious, start here. I mean, these are very giant tables, so it takes a little bit of patience to go through them, but at least to know, what's the difference between these 2 tables. You can see exactly what the criteria is for each one. Thank you. And then on the STS website, the other things that I keep open are the rules to determine primary diagnosis and primary procedure and the combination procedure codes. And that makes a big difference too. There's been some changes with the most recent analysis report. that may explain some of the discrepancies that people are seeing. I think that's the end of ours, Leanne.
Excellent. Thank you, Chastity. Thank you, Leslie. Just real quick before we move on to questions, I know we've got some questions in the Q&A. Contact information, just a quick slide, just my contact information. If you're not sure who to contact me directly. I'll get you to the appropriate resource. Again, database operational questions, questions regarding your participation agreement, contracts, payments, things like that, go to stsdb@sts.org. And then tech support, analysis, report related questions, IQVIA dashboard platform, risk adjusted participant dashboard questions, please send those to stsdb_helpdesk@sts.org. Upcoming CHSD webinars. Our next monthly webinar is scheduled for February 21st at 12 p.m. Central. And then our next user group call is March the 7th, right before harvest close. So we'll probably go over some harvest close checklists, little harvest close, make sure harvest cleanup, database cleanup checklist, just some things you need to make sure you cover before you submit your final harvest. So we'll go over that in our March 7 webinar. All right. Next, we're going to turn things over, just get to your questions. I know we've got a few in here, so let's go ahead and tackle these. Chastity, I know you've answered this question before regarding inclusion criteria. What cases should be reported to CHSD?
Yes, so I don't know what the specific question is about whether something should or shouldn't, but essentially the rule of thumb is anything that's being done by your congenital surgeons covered on your contract, so within the walls of your hospital, should be entered into the CHSD database. I don't know if there's more specific information there. We don't exclude based on any diagnoses, even if it's a, I don't know, cardiomyopathy that's secondary to a toxic metal exposure. I know that's not quote unquote CHSD, but if the transplant is being done by your congenital surgeons on at your facility, you would include those cases. You would include every, all of the washouts that you do when someone's on ECMO or on VADS. I'm trying to think what else anyone else has asked me, like, should this be included?
There's no age
right, no age limit.
Yeah.
So if an adult patient is being done at your facility by your surgeons, then yes, it will be reported into the database.
Thank you. Yeah, and Melissa, if you have other, specific questions, please reach out to me and we can get those answered for you as well. Vera, are individual sites made aware of where they fit into this rating summary? Are you asking if we don't send out any type of formal communication saying where you fell within the ratings or in the composites?
But it would be in table 16 on your analysis report on the top. It will say you are performing better than expected. As expected, or worse than expected, not as expected, as Dr. Subramanian said the language would be. And it's already there. That's been on your table 16 for the last 2 reports, last 3 reports.
All right. I don't know, this may be a question for Dr. Subramanian. Traditionally, it seemed that the overall mortality rates are all age groups broken down by stat category. Table 16 trended downward with reducing mortality. This most recent report, the mortality rates seem to be higher. Is there a reason for that? Am I seeing that incorrectly?
Yeah, thank you, Angela. It's a good observation. We have not done a deep dive yet. As you know, we will. The task force always looks at outcomes and publishes a paper in the annals that discusses these items. One of the things we obviously look at is the mortality rate. Right now, we're still making sure that all the sites don't have a discrepancy that need to be addressed first. Once we're done with that, we will certainly look at this. And stay tuned. Hopefully in one of the future webinars, we'll be able to give you a little more data-driven response for this, Angela.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Subramanian. And Angie, regarding the Hot Topics webinar, I am reaching out to my marketing team to see if they have posted that out there. I haven't gotten a formal communication. I think they were going to send a formal communication when that was going to be available. That was my understanding, but I may not be correct. So I have an email out to Kasha and the marketing team to see when that has been, if it has been posted, and if it has not, when they expect it to be posted. So I'll follow up with you all once I know more on the AQO, post AQO webinar hot topic recording. Manual website training manual downloads are mislabeled. Thoracic says it's on January 23, but downloads December. Adult cardiac says January 23, but downloads the February manual. Is there anywhere to download? Is there anywhere to download older versions of the training manuals? We do not have the older versions of the training manual. We just keep the one version of the training manual and we build upon it. The FAQ summary that the adult cardiac training manual and the GTSC training manual provide, I think, are helpful tools for you to where you can go back and see the changes over time relatively quickly. But we don't have multiple versions of the training manual out there posted. We just build upon that training manual. And I will reach out to marketing in terms of the labeling issue. So thank you. Are REOPs included in the operations submitted in table 1?
Yes, so REOPs would be included in your total operations submitted, regardless of whatever the op type of that REOP is. They would also be included in the operations and analysis as long as they are op type CPB cardiovascular or no CPB cardiovascular. And so Maggie, then on to your next question, are only index procedures included? No. Operations and analysis are everything that is op type CPB cardiovascular and no CPB cardiovascular.
All right, thank you, Chastity. Our next question, should code 52?
Sorry,
oh yes,
sorry,
go ahead.
1 second.
Yes.
But so everybody is clear, the mortality is assigned to the index operation, right? Going on what Chastity said. So let's say a patient comes in, has a Norwood operation, then goes on ECMO, comes off ECMO, stays in the hospital, gets a Glenn, and then expires, all within that episode of care. For the sake of calculating the O to E ratio, the mortality will be assigned to the index procedure only. And that, in the example I gave you, is the Norwood. I hope that's clear. Thank you, Chastity. That was a very good answer.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Subramanian, for clarifying that. Let's see here. Should code 5012 say valvuloplasty non-systemic? If you look back at the paper, it specifies 460 tricuspid.
I'll pull it up and look if you want to move on, and then we can.
Okay,
see.
thank you. All right, question from Amy. Wondering, curious why TOF RV to PA conduit 380 is not included in the benchmark operations for mortality, referring to the analysis overview. It is listed in the lesion specific table 24. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent question, Amy. I'll take that. So we intentionally have separated what operations go into the benchmark, which is table 18, versus what operations go into the lesion specific tables, in this case, table 24. I immediately right now cannot recall what the conversation regarding TOF RV to PA conduit, and I can look into it and get back to you. But I want to answer this question from a more general perspective. We tend to be more inclusive in the lesion specific tables because we can actually split them down by sub rows to say, hey, this is the total number of TOF repairs you did. These were the number of TOF repairs with ventriculotomy. This is the number without ventriculotomy. This is the number with transannular. This is the number with RV to PA conduit. So in general, we tend to be more inclusive for the lesion specific tables. But when it comes to benchmark operations, we attempt to keep it a little bit more homogeneous, because the benchmark operations do not allow you for a deep dive into what the associated procedures were or associated conditions were, because it's a risk unadjusted reporting on table 18. For that reason, not just for TOF with RV to PA conduit, for other operations as well, there will be a discrepancy between what is included in the lesion specific table and what's included in the benchmark operation table. By design, this is constantly voted on by the congenital heart surgery database task force. And that's why the difference exists. With respect to TOF RV2PA conduit in particular, Amy, I'm happy to go back and look at our discussions to see why this decision was made, but it does seem within the same spirit of the explanation I just gave.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Subramanian. All right. There was a hand raised, and I'm sorry, it's been raised for a little bit. So let me jump over. I apologize. I just noticed that you had your hand raised. I don't know. It's Crescent. So I'm going to unmute you. I don't know if you have if you had a question. You'd have to unmute yourself on your end. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Okay, so maybe your hand was raised by accident. All right, so moving on to our next question from Melissa. My question on inclusion criteria is because we have added some primarily adult surgeons to the congenital contract so that their congenital cases can be reported, but we aren't reporting all of their cases into the congenital database. So that's why Melissa was asking the question on what cases were the inclusion criteria.
Well, I'll take that question. Yeah, it's a difficult one for anyone else. Folks, I hear you. I really hear you loud and clear, Melissa. I recognize that this is a discrepancy, especially when it's adult congenital cases. We're working very closely with Dr. Nelson, Jennifer Nelson, and now Dr. Hani Najim, who is the chair of the workforce on adult congenital. We're really working closely with them to resolve this distinction. At this point in time, I'm going to give you the same response that we're giving all the other centers for uniformity. If your surgeons believe that an operation is an operation done for underlying congenital heart disease, please, whenever possible, we would like for you to report that into the congenital heart surgery database. In other words, to answer your question, please look at the denominator as surgery for congenital heart disease. If that's the denominator, then the numerator should belong in the CHSD database. I think this is for us, a better way right now of coding the cases, rather than saying, hey, a particular surgeon did the case, so let's put that in the congenital heart disease database for the adult congenital patients. For the pediatric congenital patients, we would say, as long as there is a pediatric congenital surgeon that's doing the operation, please put it in the database. I understand the inherent controversy. I really get it. I get it. I understand why it may be difficult for you. We will continue to work on making it easier. But where we're going is right now, anything pediatric, if the pediatric heart surgeon does it, please put it in the congenital heart surgery database. Anything adult congenital, if the surgeons feel like the surgery was done for an underlying congenital heart disease, please, when possible, put it in the congenital heart surgery database. I hope that's clear as mud. It's as good as I can do right now. So thank you for asking the question. Thank you for challenging us to make it better for you. We will keep trying.
Thank you, Dr. Subramanian. And Melissa, hope that helps. Let's see, and Angie, along this, I think all operations done by your cardiac surgery should be entered, right? But do all have to be submitted to IQVIA? All right.
I don't know if there's an answer published on that.
Yeah. So, but do all have to be submitted to IQVIA? So your SDS contract states all operations should be collected and submitted. Angie, if you could, I don't want to give an incorrect answer here because like Leslie says, I don't know if there's any specific documentation that says that. I don't know. So let me follow up with Donna and team there, Angie. Can you just shoot that to me in email, please? Regarding which surgeries to include, our pediatric surgeon does lung transplants on adults with no history of CHSD. I was advised in one of monthly calls to not include these patients. Does that advice still hold true?
Yes,
Yep.
Right, based on what Dr. Subramanian just said.
Yep.
A lung transplant with no history
history.
of congenital heart disease, then
Right.
is not being
On an
done
adult.
for an underlying diagnosis of congenital heart disease. So therefore, yes.
Okay. Nancy, is it mandatory we put pulmonary blood flow for Norwoods?
Yes.
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 Go ahead, Leslie.
Sorry. Yes. That's it.
Yes.
And that's spelled out in the training manual under your diagnose or under your procedure for Norwood. It mentions it there. It's been answered as an FAQ. It's been included in previous webinars. Your Norwood will not be analyzed if you haven't included in your procedure list what the source of pulmonary blood flow is.
And a plug to fill out the procedure specific factors that go with it, please, because
Yes.
that question will be asked again in the PSF as source of pulmonary blood flow. We feel that's very, very important for us to collect that information for a variety of reasons. So please, Chastity is absolutely correct. It is mandatory to separately put the source of pulmonary blood flow, and please do your best to also answer the procedure specific factors.
Correct. Thank you. And if you enter just the procedure specific factor and not indicate the source of pulmonary blood flow, you will get a warning message within the IQVIA platform. Next question from Marina. What is the rationale for entering every single washout the patient undergoes? These are not evaluated for analysis, correct?
I'll take that question.
Mhm.
So Marina, you're asking an important question. We agree that it seems duplicative, but this really helps us iteratively improve our database. We have found that trying to collect as much information as possible with the recognition, with the absolute recognition that that is a lot of effort for you data managers, overall helps us improve the database moving forward. I'll give you two quick examples. And I talked about this at the current STS meeting on why and how we utilize these data. I'll give you two very quick examples. One is it allows for local institutional QI. I, for example, have used our washout and bedside sternal closures with the preoperative factors and with how difficult it is and how sick these patients are to successfully leverage the need for additional support in our CT-ICU, which is where we do our washouts and delayed sternal closures. So from an institutional QI PI perspective, it is something that has really helped us do better, utilize the tool of CHSD to improve our local practice. That's one example. The second example is I can envision a scenario where it may not be the washout, but there was once an important analysis done on delayed sternal closures using STS database, where these things actually allowed us to understand the landscape of what kinds of patients undergo these operations. The last thing I will tell you is that it's a slippery slope, right? If we end up saying, okay, don't enter it for a washout, where does that stop? When do we say you only enter it for an index procedure and don't enter it for any other non-index procedure that happens? And once we go down that slippery slope, you can quickly understand how we will be missing some Glens that are done in the same episode of care as a Norwood, or a Ross that is done in the same episode of care as an aortic valve repair. We would go down a slippery slope from which it's very difficult to recover. All this to say that we very much recognize the additional effort that you data managers have to go through to put these data in for a washout. I get it. Other than saying thank you so much for doing it, I really believe that it helps the database and the individual institution. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, for post-op length of stay, for the post-op length of stay PLOS calculation, does it include mortalities?
Yes.
Yep.
The mortalities are included in the post-op
Yep.
length of stay. And again, pros and cons to either way. But for right now, it does include the mortalities.
Yep. Does the benchmark table only include index procedures? If a patient gets a Norwood and a Glen in the same admission, is the Glen captured in the benchmark table?
No, it is only the index procedures. So this is true of the benchmark tables as well as the lesion specific tables.
Correct.
A good, sorry to
Mhm.
interrupt you.
No, you're
A
fine.
good rule of thumb when you're going through your reports is to look at what is reported. And if it reports mortality or outcomes of some manner, then it's only talking about the index. That's what's analyzed and that's how they report it. And that's a good way to just kind of pick and choose when you're looking at the tables to know which ones are just index.
Good point, Leslie. Thank you. All right. This is a question from Kate. Dr. Fernandez's AQO presentation discussed patients who discharged with hospice orders should be an operative mortality. Is this the case? I have not seen an update in the training manual. So I know we've talked about this on previous webinars, and Chastity had talked about it, I believe, on our last webinar. And there hasn't been, I don't know if Dr. Subramanian knows if there's been any further discussion, but I know for ACSD and GTSD, hospice are considered, hospice cases are considered as an operative mortality, but in CHSD, we don't have any way to follow that. We don't capture if the patient was discharged to hospice. So I think there needed to be further discussion for the CHSD to see if this was going to impact congenital, how it was going to impact congenital, but I don't personally know of any outcomes to any further discussions. I don't know if Dr. Subramanian has any additional detail about that discussion.
I don't either, and we will take this back to the task force, Kate, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you. Question from Jen. Sent Chastity and Leanne an email about ACHD cases this morning. Can you expand on your explanation on cases to include if they are completed at a facility outside of our children's hospital? Should we only be including cases done at our own facility? On our own invoices, it lists our PID and participant facilities. Does that mean we can only include those done at the participant facility? So, yes. So Jen, you can only submit cases according to your current agreement with the STS. So if your current agreement, if you don't have like a surgeon group, which you can have multiple facilities, if your agreement is or your hospital specific, you can only submit cases that are on your agreement. STS, when you begin submitting data to IQVIA, just as we did at DCRI in the past, when we checked cases that were submitted, if they were cases that were being included that were only on your contract for via surgeon MPI and hospital MPI, those checks will be happening in the future, in the very near future here at IQVIA. So you can only submit cases for procedures that were done at the hospital on your current agreement. Does that, I don't know if Dr. Subramanian wants to.
I completely agree.
Yes.
You captured the question very well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I looked up that combination code 5012.
Mhm.
And it is for a Norwood plus valvuloplasty systemic AV valve plus conduit placement RV to PA. So it does say 460, which in our current 3.41 code is tricuspid valve. I think that's because Norwood generally, the tricuspid would have been systemic on a single ventricle, at least on this. If Dr. Meyer were here, he would say, this is the perfect reason for needing diagnosis.
Channeling our inner Dr. Meyer.
I'm feeling it, but in the new version, we're updating 460 to be tricuspid and or non-systemic valve. So it may mean a difference in how it's analyzed.
Yes, Leslie, that's the correct answer. Angie, thank you for pointing it out. I think because of lack of clarity in the database, in the data collection form, that is, I'm owning it. It's because we did not make this clear in the past. Even though the, within air quotes, tricuspid valve is the systemic AV valve in a single right ventricle patient who undergoes Norwood procedure, several data managers have coded it as tricuspid valvuloplasty, and it has been analyzed with other tricuspid alveoloplasties, such as, say, in a Epsteinoid but non-Epstein's valve. We identified that this was an area that required clarification, which is why once 6.2, 3.2 comes out, we will get rid of this isolated anatomic definition of valves, and we make it very clear that it is tricuspid or non-systemic AV valve mitral or systemic AV valve, aortic, neo-aortic, or truncal valve. So those terminologies are being corrected moving forward. Like Leslie correctly said, that will mean that some of the previously entered cases were misassigned, for want of a better term. I don't even know if that's a proper English term, but we're just going to deal with the fact that that's how it is, and it's a relatively small number of cases, hopefully, and so we're just gonna deal with that moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Dr. Subramanian. All right. I am not seeing any additional questions. We are right on the hour. I don't know if anyone has anything else they want to add. Just real quick, again, my contact information's here, as well as the database operational email and analysis report questions help desk email. So again, stsdb_helpdesk@sts.org. And just a reminder, our next monthly webinar is February 21st, and our next user group call is March the 7th, just prior to harvest close. All right, I don't see any additional questions coming in, so thank you everyone for joining today. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Thank you, Chastity, Leslie, Melinda, Dr. Subramanian. Greatly appreciate you being on these calls. Thank you so much, everyone. And please reach out if you have any additional questions. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Thank you, everyone.